This is the first popular expression of anger and opposition to President Macron's attempts to reform France's complicated labour laws. Those regulations are under 3,500 pages, and he and others sympathetic to his cause would argue they restrict growth and keep unemployment high. In France, it's 9.5%, much higher for the over 20s, much higher than elsewhere in Europe. But previous presidents have tried to do the same thing. They've all been defeated here on the street by strikes and demonstrations, by France's left and its well-organized union movement. Some say things are slightly different this time. For one, President Macron promised reform in his election campaign. He says he has the democratic mandate to make the changes necessary to liberate the French labour market. And today, only one union is represented, the CGT, France's most left-wing communist-backed union. You would expect it to be here, but others invited to join in, including France's biggest, refused to join in. And that gives some people the impression here that this time there is a greater appetite for reform, and Emmanuel Macron's ideas, which are being watched closely both here and across the European Union, may find greater traction, and he may succeed where others have failed.
Our editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, joins me now from Paris as well. Craig, welcome to the show. You've also been out on the streets today. What was the mood like on the streets when you were there compared to previous Labour protests?
The police said there were 24,000 protesters. The union Simon spoke of, the CGT, said there were 60,000. And a real good protest here in France gets a minimum of 100,000. The last big protest here a few years ago was 400,000 people. It's protest season here, September in France, and nobody's going out on the streets because people have reform fatigue. That's really what it comes down to. That is
interesting. And Craig, you and I have talked about this previously on the show, but once again, do you feel that there's a sea change happening in France in terms of attitudes to labour laws?
Oh, well, there certainly is, but based on my wandering through the crowd today, that is Macron doesn't have to worry about the change in labour laws. The unvarnished truth, Azar, is that the French public is really no longer worried about their jobs. You know, what they're angry about, and this is about anger, is that their salaries never go up. And this is what's going to smack Macron in the face come the new year. You know, this thing about the unions, we spend so much time with the unions, enough already. You know, there's going to be another protest on the 22nd. Now, you look at these 4 other unions. Well, they're going to go the way the wind blows. And guess what? They'll negotiate until their rank and file tells them to hit the street. But what you hear on the street today is not, you know, Marxist slogans, you know, quotes from Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. What you hear is a question. When am I going to get a raise?
That's an interesting point, Craig. I mean, in a way, that Macron should be kind of happy about that, because that is actually a problem that's not that he's not alone in facing. When you look at the UK, you look at the US, inflation is actually running far faster than wage growth. So by that token, I suppose politically he's fairly secure. But what are analysts predicting as to what the economic effects of Macron's reforms could be if they were all implemented?
Well, again, the unvarnished truth here is the effects are going to be quite minimal. You know, there's going to be eased redundancy. They're going to streamline worker representation, cap on labor court payouts, you know, more flexibility for small businesses, less union involvement. And you have people like the left-wing Jean-Luc Mélenchon going out saying, you know, you can't negotiate social regression. You hear a lot of the Marxist babble going on the street, but it's pretty much knee-jerk stuff. Again, as Simon pointed out, you know, this is protest season in France. It'll go on for a couple of more months, and it's going to be real interesting to see if more people come out. Right now, the conventional wisdom is they're not. But they want to raise.
But one red line, of course, which Macron would cross at his peril is the 35-hour work week. That is something that he has not touched. What are businesses saying about what should be done about that?
Well, they want to junk the whole 35-hour work week deal. But it does, you know, the 35-hour work week is, if you don't really get overtime here as such in the United States, and people here do not work extra hours unless they get paid, and the government more or less prevents them from doing it. It's all included in this, you know, nearly 4,000-page labor code, which even the lawyers who have to decode it are confused by this. These changes that Macron is making through executive order are long overdue, and the business community is applauding them. But is it really enough to meet the demands of 2017 and 2018? A lot of people are saying no. Just look at the story we ran the other day, Azar, which was quite significant. You have banks and other institutions in the UK not coming to France. They're going to Frankfurt.
Frankfurt, indeed. Yes, that is something that we are watching as well after Brexit, of course. Craig Copetas in Paris, thank you ever so much.